Hello, fourth year students. Today we are going to talk about assessing grammar. As you know, grammar has a very important status in learning and teaching foreign languages. Uh, whatever method or approach you are following in teaching your students, first of all, there is a big importance that has been placed on teaching grammar. So as you see that, or as you know that teaching languages, especially foreign languages, have witnessed a different the use of or the following or the adoption of different approaches and methods. Each of these methods or approaches has in fact focused so much on grammar, whatever way or method that it is followed in teaching them or in teaching it. Okay, so for instance, if we start with the first approach used in teaching the foreign languages, which is the grammar translation method, we can see that from the title, from the name of this approach, that grammar was very important in what according to this method or according to this approach. Grammar should be was taught and learned at the same time throughout memorization and translation. Okay, but if we move to another approach or method used in teaching the foreign languages, just for example the dry direct method, you can see that there's also some sort of concentration or focusing on grammar, but the way, the techniques that the teachers were following in teaching grammar according to the direct method what become different. How? They see that, or they believed that the grammar should not be taught directly, but grammar can be acquired throughout exposure to language. Okay, the more that you expose your students to the foreign language, the faster and the better way they are going to acquire the correct grammatical structures of that language, just like how the native speakers acquire their language. If we come to the communicative approach that was originated between the 1980s and the 1950s, we can see that also there is some sort of concentration or focusing on teaching and learning grammar. But you see that the method that is followed in teaching grammar is also what different. Here or within the communicative approach, the or a grammar should be taught and assessed throughout what communication in context. Okay, so this means that the communicative approach recognizes that grammatical competence is integral to language. So the learner should have what is called grammatical competence of the foreign language, but he should be able, or the learner, we mean, should be able not only to know or to have knowledge about the grammatical structures of the language, but they should be at the same time able to use this knowledge in communication or in communicating about a meaningful context. So, what is a grammatical knowledge? This is very important. We said that within the communicative approach, there has been a focus or concentration on what is called grammatical knowledge. When we come to assess, when we come to test our students in grammar, we have to assess or test or measure their grammatical knowledge. the assessment or the testing of the grammatical knowledge also has been different according to the method of teaching that was used. For instance, if you remember, we said in the grammar translation approach, because much of the concentration or the focus was on grammar, on teaching grammar, so when they test their students at that time, they were mainly testing what their memorization, okay, of the grammatical structures, or their ability to recite the grammatical rules, their ability to provide translation of text by using what the correct grammatical rules, the rules that they have memorized. Today, knowledge of grammar is evaluated by its correct or appropriate use. So we are here because we are following a new and a different approach. We are not after only memorization. We are not after only making our students memorize the grammatical rules and structures of language, but we should be also after making our students or helping them in using these grammatical rules or these grammatical structures that they have learned in communication. So when you come to assess, when you come to test your students, you have to focus on this point. You have to test whether your students are able to use the grammatical knowledge that they have acquired because of that you taught them these things in communication through listening, speaking, reading, and writing in the foreign language. So in terms of assessment, grammar is central to language description and test taker performance. And therefore, it is important to know how best to assess the learner's knowledge of grammar. So it is your job now as a teacher to have an idea about the best techniques, the best tasks that you can include in your test in order to measure your students' ability in using the grammatical structures that you have taught them. So here we need to understand first of all, we need to understand what is meant by grammatical knowledge. You know that within the communicative approach of teaching and testing the foreign language, there has been much concentration on communicative competence. One of the components of the communicative competence is the grammatical competence. Okay? Communicative competence includes different components. One of them is the grammatical competence, the grammatical knowledge. Competence means knowledge. So, what do we mean now by grammatical knowledge? Is it only that our students should know the rules of the language, the forms of the grammatical structures of language, or what? If we come to Larsen Freeman in these books or works that she has published about this, she identifies for us three important components of grammatical knowledge. She believes that grammatical knowledge means that the students or the learners of the foreign language should learn the following things about the grammar of the language or the foreign language they are learning. First, they have to learn the grammatical form or structures of language. Second, the grammatical meanings of these forms. And third, their pragmatic meaning or use in a given context. Detail about these three components of the grammatical competence according to Larsen Freeman, we can say that number one, okay, when we say that the learner should know about the form of the grammatical structure of language. What do we mean by form here? We mean that both morphology and syntax. Morphology is related to the form of the word. For example, if we take a verb, the verb, and within morphology, we can see that the verb can have different forms because we know that verbs in English can either be what? Base, okay, can VED1, which means in the past simple, VED2 in the past participle, ing, verb with the ing. So you see, it has what? Different forms. When you add the ed to the verb, or when you change your verb into past and past participle, you are going to have two types of verbs, regular and irregular. Even adding the ed to the verb for the regular verbs should be made according to rules, because sometimes you need to change something in the word, in the form of the verb, in the structure of the verb, and then you add ed or ing. Okay, even with the s, the third person singular s, when you add a third person singular s, this has to be what? Some changes can be made, whether in the form of the verb, in the way we write the verb, in the way we pronounce the verb itself. So all these are related to what? To morphology. Now we come to syntax. What do we mean by syntax? Syntax means when you are going to put the words together in order to make a larger component, like a sentence or a paragraph. So here you are going to follow rules. Okay, there should be, for example, one of the simplest, easiest rules in syntax is that you should have what? Agreement, concord between the subject and the verb. Okay, and there are rules for this agreement. Also, there can be agreement between the verb and its object. The structure of the sentence, the pattern that you are going to follow to make what your sentences can be different. Okay, the type of the sentence you are making can be simple or complex, consisting of one clause or more than one clause. When you are having a complex sentence of more than one clause, how are you going to to join them? So you see, this is syntax. So this is the first thing that, or the element of the grammatical knowledge. The learner should know about what? The morphology, the form of what? The structures or the forms that we have in language. And what do we mean by form? Form includes both morphology and syntax. Number two, grammatical meaning. Okay, so we have learned the forms of the word in terms of their morphological structure and syntactic rules, but what about meaning? Are the components, or are the structures that we are producing meaningful, have meaning or not? Okay. Number three, the pragmatic or implied meaning that results from both of the form and meaning of this grammatical structure. Is it suitable to be produced in this context or not? So you see, here we are going to talk about what? When we talk about the pragmatic meaning or the implied meaning, we are talking about the use of the grammatical structure in a certain context and whether it is suitable or not. So these three elements are what makes for us the grammatical knowledge of a language. Where can we find grammatical knowledge? So grammatical knowledge of form, meaning, and use. You see, grammatical knowledge consists of these three things. And grammatical knowledge, as you see, means what? The grammatical competence that we should assess as teachers in our students. So the grammatical knowledge consists of these three things: form, meaning, and use. Where can we find the grammatical knowledge? The grammatical knowledge, it is said here, it occurs at the sentence level and beyond the sentence. Okay, so what does this mean? That it means that when you put or when you design your test in order to assess a grammar, you have to to make sure that the stems, for instance, or the task should include a sentence and above the sentence. Should not include individual words, and you are saying that I am testing grammar. It is not acceptable, because when you start from the sentence and what is above the sentence, for example, a paragraph or an essay, in here you are testing what the grammatical knowledge. You are looking at you are looking after what the grammatical knowledge of your students, because here you are testing what form, meaning, and use. So where can we find these things? The sentence or something above the sentence. We call this what? Discourse level of language. Within the discourse level of language, we are going to see or to find different things related to grammar, like for example, the reference, the relation between words. Okay, this pronoun refers back to which noun, for example. This is a grammar. What kind of information? What is the given information? What is the old information? What is the new information? Okay, these are also going to be to affect grammar, the grammatical structure of the text. Okay, again, pragmatic meanings depends on what again. So it doesn't only depend on what on the language itself, on the form and meaning. We have to look at again at what the use. Okay, the use of this discourse. Is it suitable to the context that in which we are using it? For example, when we talk or when we speak with each other as friends, are we going to use the same language, the same forms, the same meanings that we can use when we talk to someone who is higher than us? Okay, above us, like our teachers, like our parents, and so on? Of course not. So you see here, the language also in grammatically should also be suitable to what? To the context in which it is supposed to be used, to the socio-linguistic competence, context, to the socio-cultural, to the psychological, to the rhetorical meaning of the context in which these sentences or something that is above the sentence can occur at. So now we are going to learn how to design a communicative test for our students in grammar. To assess the grammatical knowledge of your students, first of all, you have to identify or limit your objective. You are after what from this test? You are going to test what? Is it form, meaning, or use? Or maybe two of them or all of them. Okay? So it is said here, to assess the grammatical knowledge of your students, you have to target one or more of the features of form or and meaning. What does it mean to target? Means to make to establish the goal of your test. Okay, what is the goal? What is the aim of your test? Is it to test only the form of certain grammatical structures, or their meaning, or their use, or maybe form and meaning, or meaning and use, or all of them? Okay, so what kind of tasks that you can include in your communicative test in grammar? In fact, you are going to have two types of tasks here. There can be tasks that ask your students only to select the correct choice. Okay, while other types of tasks that can or may ask your students to produce language. So if we start with the first types of tasks in which your students have to select the correct response, of course, we can find this clearly in the multiple choice task, in which, if you remember, you as a teacher you are going to design a multiple choice question from a different number, from a number of items. Each item includes two components: a stem, okay, which is an incomplete sentence, a sentence that has some of its elements or one of its elements has been deleted by you. And the job of your students is to complete this sentence by choosing the correct response from a number of options that you have given them. The correct or the suitable number for options, because you are testing here grammar, is 4. one of them is going to be the correct answer, which is called the key, while the others are incorrect, which are called distractors or incorrect responses. And also we have mentioned here again, or repeated for you, something about the advantages and the disadvantages of using the multiple choice test in testing grammar, and we have discussed this previously. You can see that this example, it is a multiple choice item in which you see the teacher has provided his students with a stem. The stem comes in a form of a conversation between Yukio and Christina. As you see, one of the sentences in this conversation is incomplete. It is deleted by the teacher and replaced by a blank. The job of the students is to read this conversation, understand it, and then choose the suitable form that can fill, okay, the blank, or complete the blank by choosing one of them, depending on what, as you see, the aim of the teacher is what? Is to test grammatical meaning. So how can now the student choose which one is suitable here? The student should read all the conversation carefully, understand the meaning, and then choose one of them. So here the teacher is not after form, it's not after use, but he is after what? He's after meaning. So he's now testing only one component of grammatical knowledge, which is meaning. Choosing the correct response here depends on understanding the meaning of the situation, of the situation in general. So the students here should not only read the sentence that has been incomplete, the sentence that has the blank. No, the students should read and understand all the three sentences that make this short conversation. Understanding all of them will help the students choose the correct response. Okay? Another form for the multiple choice test is called error identification. So error identification is also going to be in a form of a multiple choice test. Why? Because here you are also going to give your students a sentence in which you are going to identify or to limit for them four options, okay, four different positions in the sentence, and you ask them to identify the mistake, identifying the item that has been used incorrectly. So as you see here, this is in this example, it is what? An error identification test in which the teacher has given his students a sentence, and he has underlined four different positions for different words or structures in the sentence, marking them by options A, B, C, and D, and asking them to identify the error. Here, if you read the sentence, you are going to see that the teacher is aiming at testing two things: form and meaning. Okay? I want you to read this sentence carefully, understand it, and in our class, which is going to be next Sunday, I'm going to ask you about how is the teacher now in this sentence testing form and meaning. Where is the incorrect element in this sentence, and how this incorrect element reflects form and meaning, grammatical form and meaning. Okay? Another form of selected response questions or tasks you can include in your exam or for your students in grammar is called discrimination task. Discrimination task, okay, you give your students a prompt a question, an item, which can be either in a form of language, which means a sentence or something above the sentence, or non-language, or sometimes a picture. Okay? And you ask them to choose between two options you give them. True or false, right or wrong, same or different. Here, these are called what? Discrimination task. Discrimination items are used to measure the difference between two similar areas of grammatical knowledge, such as pronouns in subject and object positions. Okay, so you are going to see, I'm going to give you, you see, this is a discrimination task that can be used in a grammar exam. The form of language here, of the task here is non-language. Why is it non-language? Because here the teacher is using what? Pictures. The teacher here is using these pictures and is asking his students to choose the picture that correctly matches the sentence that he gives them below. So the sentence is, she delivered it to him. The job of the students is to choose which sentence can be suitably matching what this sentence. So what do we call this here? We call it a discrimination task. What does the teacher test here? You see, it tests both grammatical form and meaning. Okay, form, because here we are, as you see, we are talking about, if you examine the sentence, here the sentence includes what? Subject and object pronouns. Okay, which one is going to be she, and in which picture she is going to be she, the subject, and him is going to be the object. Okay, and also at the same time, when the students are going to look at these pictures and examine or choose the correct one, they are going to understand, they are going to do that depending on understanding this picture. So this means understanding meaning. Okay, so here the aim of the teacher is to test what? Form and meaning. Another types of selected response questions or task is noticing task or consciousness raising task. Here you are going to give your students a text, which can be a sentence or something above the sentence like a paragraph, and you ask them to select a certain grammatical structure. Okay, so of course here when they are going to select a certain grammatical structure, they are going to test what? They are going to do that depending on, again, on form and meaning. For example, here the teacher is giving his students a passage which comes in a form of a short paragraph, and he's asking them to read this passage carefully and underline with the auxiliary with. You know that with can have different meanings. So here he wants them to underline with when it is used to refer to the habitual past, and circle it when it refers to the present or future. Okay, so you see here, the teacher here is identifying for them the form of the grammatical structure that he wants them to discriminate, to select, to notice in this passage, and he wants them to do that depending on certain meanings for this grammatical form. Okay, so they have to read this paragraph carefully, understand it, and then identify which with, okay, refers to a habitual past and which with refers to what? To the present or to the future. So here the teacher is examining what, or testing what? Grammatical meaning of a certain grammatical structure. Hello again, fourth year students. This video this part of the video, part 2, is going to talk about the second type of the uh, uh, task that we can include in a grammar exam. Okay, and these tasks are going to be supply ones. What do I mean by supply ones? Supply ones means that, or supply tasks mean that the tasks that will require from the students to produce language in order to answer them. We have here two types of production or answers that the students need to produce here. They can either be limited ones, limited answers. What does it mean to have a limited answer? A limited answer means it is going either to be in the form of individual words or simple sentences, or it can be an extended answer. And an extended answer means that the student here, he has or she has to provide or to produce or to supply a long answer, which can be either spoken or written. So if we start with the first type of the supply answer task, which is going to require the students to produce limited production. So in this type of task, the input is going to be in a form of language, in a form of questions made as sentences, or made by the use of language, linguistic structures, or it can be it can take the form of, for example, pictures. Okay, here the students are going to read the question or look at the pictures, understand them, okay, and answer or provide the answer for these questions by producing a limited amount of language production. This response can vary from a single word to a sentence, depending on the grammatical ability or the construct that is defined. It can also depend on the level of your students. For example, if you are testing beginners or children by using such questions, of course you are going to take into consideration their level and their age. Okay, and so here you are going to require from them or ask them to supply short answers represented by what? By using single words, individual words. With the more advanced students, you can acquire them, or you can use with them questions that require to be answered by short sentences, for example. What about scoring these questions or the responses for these questions? Their scoring can either be dichotomous, okay, or partial credit. What does it mean by dichotomous scoring? It means that you have only one criterion for correctness, for the correct answer. So the answer that the students are going to provide for you is going either to be true or false, correct or incorrect. Why? Because here you are scoring, or you are scoring the answer depending on one criterion only. If you find this criterion, so this means that the answer is correct. If you do not find it, the answer is incorrect. While the partial credit scoring, here you are going to depend in scoring the answers of your students on multiple criteria, more than one criteria. So as if you are having a rubric, okay, as certain elements that if you find them, all of them, okay, so the students are going to get a full mark. If you find some of them, so they are going to get not to get the full mark, but some of the mark, okay, for example, half of the mark. If you didn't find any of them, of course, they are going to get nothing. Among the most common limited production tasks, okay, are gap fill, short answer, and dialogue completion task, and we are going to provide you with examples for each one of these tasks. For example, the gap filling task, within these types of tasks, you see that the language is presented in a form of a sentence, a dialogue, or a passage in which a number of words are deleted. The deletions are made here to test the grammatical ability of your students. So the test takers must fill the blanks, fill the empty blanks with the correct forms of the words, the correct grammatical structure of these words, okay, depending on what they have understood, depending on me. So you are here testing what form and meaning. For example, you see here, this is a short paragraph, a very short paragraph of 2 sentences. In this example, the criteria for correctness is as what the grammatical form. So here, in all these 3 blanks, there is only one verb that should be used, which is the verb read. But of course, the verb read here should be used in different tenses depending on what? Depending on the meaning of the sentence. Okay? Short answer task. In this type of task, the input is going to be in a form of a question or questions related to what? A reading comprehension passage or oral or visual stimulus. So either you give your students a short passage to read it and then answer certain questions, short answer questions related to the information presented in this reading passage, okay? Or you make them listen, okay? Listen to a passage or listen to a conversation, so it is going to be as if it is a listening test, okay? Or you make them look at pictures, certain pictures, and you ask them short answer questions. So the expected test taker, the student here, should understand first of all the material that you are providing them with, okay, and then answer certain questions by providing a short answer, whether this short answer can be in the form of a single word or one sentence or a sentence, okay, and also the number of the sentences that can be required from the students can be variable from 1 sentence to 2 sentences. These short answers can be scored dichotomously. So either they are right or wrong, correct or incorrect. If you are here after what? Checking a certain grammatical structure. Okay? So, or it can be what? Partial credit. If you are here testing more than one thing, form and meaning. For example, you see here, this is a passage that the teacher has given for his students. They have to read it, understand it, and then answer the questions that he provided below the passage. You see, the questions have come in the form of WH questions, and we know that WH questions, they require to be answered by what? By using short sentences. So this is not a reading comprehension test. Okay? You are here after what? Checking the grammatical ability or the grammatical knowledge of your students. So in order to understand, in order to answer these questions correctly, the students should what? Should read and understand the reading this passage, and then put or provide their answer or supply their answers to these questions. After all, you are what? You are going to what? To make or to score the answers of your students according to what is called partial credit. You are going to make a scale, okay, or make limit the criteria that you are after, you want your students to use in their answers, okay, and check their answers accordingly. For example, you are, of course, we said that these WH questions should be answered by using or by providing what, or giving a full sentence, a complete sentence. So here you are going to look at or examine the answers of your students according to the elements of the complete sentence. What should the complete sentence that you want them to provide consist of? Okay. Second, you have to check the tense. Have they used the correct tense in answering these questions? Okay. Any other structure, for example, passive or active. The forms of the verb, they should be in the past or in the present, or how they should make them in the past or the present. Okay, so here you are checking what morphology and so on. So here you are after what, as we said, you are giving them a reading passage to read it, and the function of these questions, these WH questions, is to check what, to check their grammatical knowledge. This is another type of short answer questions or short answer task. You see here, the teacher has used what is called a non-language prompt. What does mean a non-language prompt? He has used, as you see, a picture. He provides his students with a picture and he's asking them to look at this picture and answer a certain question. So what the question is, what is the woman doing? Okay, so here the students, when they are going to answer such a question, of course they are going to they have to produce language. Okay, what kind of a prediction we are expecting from our students? It is a limited prediction because you see here they have a WH question which is required to be answered by a short sentence. So in both of these examples, the test taker must provide a response that is both grammatically correct and meaningful in terms of the question asked. In the first example, the response must show understanding of phrases such as the phrases and the information that is provided in the passage in order to answer the WH questions that follow the passage correctly. And in the second example, the response must in the response the student must use what, the present continuous tense, and also must use the appropriate vocabulary in order to answer such a question. For example, the students may say the woman is using a computer, or the woman is surfing the internet, or the woman is sitting at a desk. Okay. Another type of production task that requires limited answers from the students, it is the dialogue completion task. And here the teacher is giving the students or her students a short conversation or dialogue in which a part of the dialogue, okay, some sentences from the dialogue have been what, deleted. Okay, and here the job of the students is what, to provide this to the teacher, or to answer such a question by what, by writing the deleted elements or the deleted parts from the dialogue or the conversation, depending on what, depending on how they understand this conversation or dialogue. See here, this is an example of a short conversation between two people. You see, the first one is asking a question, while the second one, who is Karina, you see her answer has been deleted. So what should the student do here in order to answer such a question? They should read the question carefully, okay, in order to what, in order to answer it correctly. Of course, they should not only read every sentence by itself, individually or apart from the other. No, they have to first of all read all the conversation, all with the missing parts, in order to understand it, in order to have an idea about what has been deleted or the elements that are missing, and then try to write the missing or the deleted parts. Okay. Another type of supply assessment task is to ask your students also to provide something, to supply an answer, to produce an answer. But here we said that the answer can be what extended. What does it mean extended? It can be a long answer in the form of, for example, of an essay, writing a paragraph or writing an essay. If you are talking about a written exam or a written test, or to what to produce a spoken text. If we are talking about what about a conversation exam. So here the purpose of the extended production test or task is to obtain large amount of language form from the test taker, from the students, and to allow for more creative construction. So here such questions will adopt the creativity of your students, will look for the creativity of students in answering and using the language. Therefore, these tasks are likely to elicit instance of authentic language use. On the other hand, because the responses of the students are usually open-ended, you see, open-ended, with a number of possible correct options, these extended production tasks are often scored using what rating scales. So here, because the answers are or such questions are open-ended questions or have open-ended answers, so we cannot depend the dichotomous scoring. We cannot say that the answer of this student is completely incorrect or completely correct. No, here the teacher, okay, should have a rubric, should have a rating scale in order to correct or score or mark the answers of his or her students. Of course, all the elements of the rubric that he is going to put in his rating scale should relate to what? To the grammatical ability or the grammatical knowledge of his or her student. Example of a rubric or rating scale that is the teacher may adopt or may follow in scoring the production or the answers of his or her students. For example, if you are asking them to write a paragraph or write an essay or produce a spoken text, okay, throughout a conversation exam. So here you can have such a rubric in order to score the answers of your students. You can, for example, give 0, okay, when you do not find any grammatical ability or any grammatical knowledge for your students, which means that all the production, all the items that have been produced by your students include what? Include grammatical mistakes. So here you didn't find any sign for grammatical knowledge in your students, so you are going to give him or her 0. While if you find that there is some sort of correctness, some elements that have been produced correctly by your students, you can give them 1, or some grammatical, or you can feel that there is some sort of grammatical knowledge, you give them 2, or broad grammatical knowledge, you give them a 3. Or if you find that all the the speech or the written text provided by your students are completely correct in terms of grammar, so you are going to give them the full mark, which is, for example, 4. Of course, this is going to be what these scores, okay, are just an example. Okay, you can divide the score, okay, that you are going to give to your to assign or to limit for a certain question depending on these scales. Like what? What are the examples that we can find in the extended prediction assessment task? We can find, for example, the information gap task. Here, such a task or such a question can be mainly used in conversation exams. You are going to divide your students, for example, into 2 groups, and for each group, you are going to give them a certain task to do, okay? And then you let your students or these 2 groups discuss with each other, ask questions to each other about his or her own task or their own task, and at the end, each group will present a short report, for example, in the form of a comparison between the task of group A and the task of group B. Okay, so here the scoring, okay, or the criteria that you are going to depend on in scoring the production of your students depend mainly on what? On grammar, because you are after assessing grammatical knowledge of your students. So you are going to put your rating scale or your rubric, all the items in this rating scale will be related to what? To grammar only. And you remember we said the grammatical knowledge that we are after in assessing should include or is related to what? To form. Have they produced the correct forms? Okay, the correct grammatical forms in language. Second, meaning. Okay, they produced the correct forms of language. They use, for example, the tenses in the correct way. The present simple tense, the present continuous, the present perfect. But were their sentences meaningful? Okay. Third, use. When they use these sentences, were they appropriate or suitable to the context? Okay, to the topic of discussion? Were there pragmatic ability? Do they have a pragmatic ability in discussing things? Do they have some fluency in conversation? Do they know how to ask questions? What type of questions they use to ask about certain pieces of information, and so on. So you see, all the questions, all the criteria that you are going to put in order to assess the performance of your students should be related to grammar only, to the what? To the grammatical knowledge of your students. And the grammatical knowledge of the students can be divided, as we said, into 3 components. What are they? Form, meaning, and use. So this is, as you see, an example of the information gap task, in which there is what a certain task has been given to 2 students, student A and student B. For student A, the teacher has given him a list of information about a certain painter, Claude Monet, while student B, he has been given a list of information about a different painter. So what is required from these 2 students to do what? They have to ask each other about the information they have about each painter. Okay? And so the teacher here is what? Is watching them, is watching the conversation that is made between these two students, the asking and the answer, the questions that have been asked and the answers that have been presented. And he has to what, or she has to do what? To check the language that is used in asking and answering. in terms of grammatical knowledge, which includes what? Form, meaning, and use. Then, what else? Does it end here? Does it stop here? No. The teacher is asking them to do what? To prepare a short report comparing the two famous painters. So after they got the information from each other, okay, they have, each one of them should work individually in preparing a report to make a comparison between the two painters. So here you see you have what you are assessing the grammatical knowledge of your students throughout two different skills. First, speaking, and then what? Writing. Another type of assessment task is what? Is the role play or simulation task. And here in the role play, again, this can be again used in what? In conversation classes, in which you assign certain roles, okay, for your students to play, or you tell them that you have a certain problem, and imagine yourselves that you are in certain positions, for example, and you have to discuss with each other, to argue, to debate with each other about the possible solutions that you can have for such a problem. So what do we call such a task? We call it a role play or simulation task. Of course, the discussions, the conversations that are going to happen between students, also they are will include what? The use of their grammatical knowledge in terms of form, meaning, and use. And here the teacher is going to be able to assess this grammatical knowledge. So as you see here, it is as a form, or it is an example of this role play or simulation task, in which the teacher is giving for his students or her students the task of certain people, okay, certain people in the government, in a committee that belongs to the government, and they have to discuss certain or a certain problem they have in the budget. Okay, so each one of them should adopt a certain position or a certain attitude and try to convince the other side of his or her opinions. So you see, the conversations here happen, okay, the discussions, the debate, the arguments that is going to happen between students who are taking the roles and discussing this problem in order to arrive at a solution. They will use certain grammatical structures in their language. For example, they may say, I see your point is, for example, is correct, however it is not possible. Okay, I think we should do this and this. So here the discussions or the debate that is going to happen between students will require from them to use certain grammatical structures of certain forms and certain meaning, and that should be also suitable for the context of situation, for the problem they are discussing, in order to convince each other. The scoring procedure that the teacher is going to follow, again, depends on what? A rating scale, a rubric. Okay, and this rating scale or rubric is going to depend on different criteria that the teacher should have in mind, or should put in mind, that he wants to test in the performance of his or her students. But it is very important that you discuss or you tell your students before the exam about these criteria, in order to be ready for them, in order to prepare themselves, okay, to that they should take care. Okay, they should take care of certain points when they perform or when they produce the language. In this way, you are going to lessen or decrease the level of anxiety that your students have because of the exam they are having, and at the same time they are going to prepare themselves well for having the exam. So with this, we have finished talking about what? Talking about the different forms of or the different types of tasks that we can use in assessing grammar within a communicative test. Thank you.